Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of dense, fascinating source material and, well, we extract the essential nuggets of knowledge for you, giving you a shortcut to being really well informed.
And today we are stepping into a future that feels, I don't know, simultaneously ancient and frighteningly modern.
It really does.
We're navigating the post-apocalyptic world of the change, and we're focusing on the dramatic rise of a High King, a man tasked with uniting all these disparate peoples against a truly formidable enemy.
Right, and the sources we're dissecting today, they're drawn from S.M. Stirling's novel, The High King of Montival. And just to set the stage for you, this story takes place about 25 years after the world just fractured.
Completely. There was this instant global event they called the Change, and what it did was permanently disable all high technology.
Everything. No electricity, no combustion engines, no gunpowder, no modern communications. It all just stopped.
Gone in a flash. So our mission really in this deep dive is to understand the geopolitical blueprint that was created by this sudden collapse. We need to chart the really complex map of this new North America.
Okay.
So we'll be identifying the organized nations, like the nascent High Kingdom of Montival and the really isolated eastern realm of Norrheim, and then trying to understand the lethal chaos of the death zones that separate them.
And the most crucial element, I think, is the forging of this anti-Cutter coalition. It's all under one man, Artos, the newly crowned High King. And we'll be looking at how this almost medieval-style combat, requiring steel armor, 7-foot spears, powerful U-bows, how that's being strategically combined with these unique spiritual and mystical elements.
Specifically, the legendary power of the Sword of the Lady and these, inherited magic.
Exactly. It's this synthesis of collapse and regrowth where it seems ancient traditions hold this newfound strategic power.
Well said. We're going to unpack the geography, the technology, the politics, and, the profound personal burden that Artos carries in trying to build a future from the ashes of the past.
Okay, so let's unpack this world reset.
Yeah.
We have to start with the sheer scale of the initial catastrophe. The sources call it the Great Dying.
Yeah.
It didn't just break the global economy, it nearly broke humanity itself.
The word catastrophe, it barely captures it. It's a massive understatement. The source material is chillingly specific on this. 5 billion people, and probably more, died in the years right after the change.
5 billion. Wow. And it wasn't a sudden thing, right? Not like a meteor?
No, not at all. It was this slow, grinding collapse. It was caused by thirst, hunger, widespread plague.
Yeah.
And of course, just relentless fighting for whatever resources were left.
So that suggests everything just got flipped on its head, value-wise. I mean, the core sociological insight here seems to be that the knowledge economy became instantly worthless.
Instantly.
And just basic survival skills became priceless commodities.
Absolutely. The change didn't just break machines, it completely inverted civilization's hierarchy. The sources make this really dark distinction, pointing out who the lucky ones were.
The lucky ones.
Yeah, they were the people who died quickly. Instantly. Astronauts in space, passengers on 747s, people deep underground in gold mines when the ventilation and the pumps just stopped forever.
So for everyone else.
For the vast majority left alive, survival required skills they didn't possess. I mean, having a PhD in astrophysics was useless.
Right.
But the ability to butcher a cow or grow a reliable crop of potatoes, that became life-saving.
And that lack of fundamental knowledge and the chaos that came from it, it totally redefined the physical map of the continent. It created what are now known as the death zones.
And we really can't ignore those. They are critical geographical facts. You see these vast regions, particularly the eastern death zone, stretching across much of the old Northeast, and then the New Desert.
The New Desert.
Which is effectively this band of just desiccated, lawless land stretching eastward from the mountains. And these aren't just empty wilderness areas, they are failed societies.
And the main thing you have to worry about in these zones, it's the Eaters, right?
The Eaters.
Who are they exactly? Just savage descendants of city survivors.
That's it. Savage, devolved descendants of urban survivors who prey mercilessly on anyone trying to pass through. They're disorganized, brutal, and there are a lot of them.
So the zones themselves almost act as a barrier.
Ironically, yes. These lethal death zones, they act as massive defensive barriers. They slow down, though they don't completely stop, the movement of larger organized threats between the East and West. It's like nature and chaos are defending these emerging nations.
Which finally brings us to those emerging nations. On the West Coast, you have Artos's core territory, Montival.
Established in the former Pacific Northwest, so Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia.
But Montival isn't monolithic, is it? It's more of an alliance of groups that had to learn to coexist.
And that internal composition is so vital for understanding Artos's political inheritance. You've got the clan Mackenzie, who represent the sort of spiritual and agrarian heart of the kingdom.
The landed gentry, basically.
Yeah, you could say that. They're often practicing these pre-change skill sets, and they act as the moral compass. And then you have the Portland Protective Association, the PPA.
Okay, the PPA is a crucial piece of jargon we need to define. They seem to be the backbone of Montival's military strength.
They are essentially the urban military-industrial corps. Highly disciplined, heavily militarized, and they're focused on maintaining salvage, technology, and infrastructure. They run the remaining city of Portland like a fortress.
So they're the steel fist.
The steel fist and the technological edge of Montival. And it's a sharp contrast to the more traditional, feudal structure of the Mackenzies.
And Artos has to balance these two.
He has to balance these two very different, very powerful factions within his own kingdom, which is already a huge challenge.
Now, let's jump far across the continent, across those death zones to the eastern realm of Norrheim. It's isolated in what was Aroostook County, Maine. This sounds like a totally different cultural experiment.
It's a remarkable achievement in isolation. Norrheim is this Norses/Asatru-influenced society, which reflects the community's adherence to the Old Norse gods.
And that wasn't an accident.
Not at all. This wasn't a random development. It stemmed from a powerful and surprisingly effective pre-change survival strategy. It was established by a figure they remember as Eric the Strong.
So this was planned.
Exactly. It was planned. He had the foresight to prepare this localized, defensible territory based on sustainable farming, well away from the coast where he knew the collapse would be worst.
So they created this stable enclave based on disciplined farming in a really harsh climate. That must have required an immediate technological regression.
Oh, absolutely. And that regression is key to understanding the military reality we're talking about in this deep dive.
What are we looking at?
The technology is utterly grounded in necessity. We are talking about genuine medieval armaments, but, slightly improved by salvaged materials. The standard protection is something called brigandine.
Brigandine.
It's a canvas or a leather jacket, but it's lined with these overlapping small steel plates that are riveted inside, and then you've got mail shirts.
So it's heavier than simple leather, but less resource-intensive than crafting a full suit of plate armor.
Exactly. And for their primary battlefield gear, they use round shields, and their core infantry weapon is the 7-foot spear.
Simple, effective.
Very. And for missile power, they field serious archers. The sources detail these bows that are often made from mountain yew stave, and they can draw over 100 pounds.
100 pounds. I want to pause on that for a second because that requires immense physical dedication. That's not a hobbyist's draw weight. That is a serious weapon.
Oh no, that's a full-time job. It tells you that Artos's forces, they rely heavily on dedicated, highly trained specialists. While Norrheim and the PPA have mass infantry, these powerful archers drawing over 100 pounds, they are the elite shock troops.
They can penetrate armor at a distance.
At a significant distance. And this physical commitment, it reflects the difference between, say, a conscript and a dedicated professional warrior who has spent their entire adolescence training with that one weapon. It's a massive commitment, especially in a world where food resources are still precarious.
And since they can't just manufacture modern materials, they have to scavenge everything.
That scavenging defines their entire material culture. Pre-change steel is absolutely critical. It's the only source they have for durable knife blades and sword steel that can actually hold an edge.
It's amazing.
It is. The sources even note the recycling of stainless steel kitchen bowls, hammered out and repurposed as rudimentary sallets, that's a type of helmet, or just simple bowl helmets.
Turning kitchen bowls into helmets.
Brass trumpets, any salvaged items, they're constantly being repurposed. The sheer ingenuity required to turn domestic scrap into military gear is it's remarkable.
So the survival of the fittest. It didn't favor the smartest in the old sense, but the ones who could quickly adapt to the past.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The shift required a total cultural overhaul. The sources really stress the return to basic animal husbandry and intensive farming. They rely on horses and oxen for plows, and they use this detailed knowledge of how to make butter, how to cure meat, how to successfully run potato houses for long-term storage.
Things we just take for granted.
Completely. That knowledge, which was once held by a tiny fraction of the global population, is now the ultimate high-value skill set. The survival of Montival depended not on finding a fuel source, but on finding people who knew how to plant a field and successfully butcher a cow.
Okay, so against this backdrop of ruin and this sort of scattered regrowth, the entire political future seems to pivot on one man. Artos Mickeson, also known as Rudi, he's the physical picture of a hero. 6'2", red blonde. But the sources repeatedly emphasize his profound reluctance to take on this destiny.
He is the ultimate reluctant hero. He's a bard's son who's been thrust onto the path of kingship. And Artos, he really represents the intersection of the spiritual and the secular leadership that Montival so desperately needs.
He seems relatable because he finds the burden
Well,
repugnant.
he does. We see his inner conflict just laid bare. He's acquired the ultimate symbol of power, but he's constantly reminding himself that he is, in his words, walking towards death.
And he explicitly wishes he could just opt out of being a king. He says he would rather work in a sawmill. What does that tell you about the nature of kingship in this new world?
It confirms that this role, it's not a crown of gold, it's a crown of thorns. Kingship here is defined by sacrifice, not by luxury. He understands that being the High King means he must be the spiritual and military shield of the entire realm.
And the shield is always the first target.
Always. His reluctance is what makes him trustworthy to the people, precisely because he doesn't lust for the power that he wields.
And that power is undeniably focused in this legendary artifact he retrieved on his quest to Nantucket Island. The Sword of the Lady.
Yes, turfing, forged for the hand of a king. And this is not just a metaphor for authority. This is an active, powerful artifact. It is the spiritual and military heart of his entire new regime.
The descriptions of the sword's physical properties are just incredible. It literally defies the physics of their collapsed world.
The sources convey its impossible nature through these specific, unforgettable details. Artos tests its sharpness by letting a strand of his own hair fall on the blade.
And it just slices it.
Slices it clean, like a razor, like light. And when he tests its power, he drives it through thick oak planks with no more effort or sound than it would have made piercing so much water.
So it's a physical manifestation of divine favor.
And unbeatable craftsmanship, something far beyond what any contemporary smith could possibly achieve.
It sounds like an ultimate weapon, but its role seems to be even more significant on the spiritual battlefield.
That's the strategic key. The sword fundamentally changes the nature of the intelligence war against their main enemy, the Church Universal and Triumphant, the CUT.
How so?
The sword amplifies Artos' connection to the divine and to the land itself, granting him these often terrifying visions of the world's death and the shape of the future. But crucially, it actively seems to block the vision of enemy adepts and sorcerers.
But blind them.
It blinds them, and they previously had this massive advantage in scouting and premonition. So the magic of the CUT, which relies on spiritual manipulation and dark foresight, is effectively being neutralized by the sword's presence.
That's not just a religious boost, that's a decisive strategic advantage.
It neutralizes the enemy's greatest asset. The CUT relies so heavily on their adept class, often referred to as a Seidkona. That's a Norse term for a woman who practices a form of shamanistic magic or just sorcerers.
Right.
Without the ability to spy on Artos' movements or peer into the future, their entire command structure becomes clumsy and reactionary. This is precisely why the prophet Sepez was so desperate to intercept the quest to Nantucket in the first place.
Speaking of Nantucket, the resolution of that quest, it immediately defines Artos' entire political philosophy. Despite the urgings of his fierce kin, Artos chooses mercy for his captured enemies.
This is a crucial defining moment for him. Artos' half-sister, Astrid Havel, a lady of the Rangers, she urged immediate total execution of the captured dark-faced corsairs and the followers of the defeated High Seeker Major Graber.
It was practical bloodlust, right? Just eliminate a threat entirely.
Exactly. But Artos, he quotes the histories and he opts for a higher ground. He says, "Do not be too eager to deal out death and judgment. Even the very wise cannot see all ends."
So he grants them mercy.
He grants them mercy, disarms them, and sends them back under escort. And this is a profound political statement. It tells the world he is not just a warlord bent on vengeance, but a king establishing law.
He's giving them a chance for redemption.
A chance for redemption, or at least a reconsideration of their allegiance. And that becomes vital for integrating captured populations later on.
And there's a small, kind of poignant human detail from Nantucket concerning Ingolf, one of Artos' key companions.
It's a wonderful reminder that even in this grand narrative of kings and swords, life goes on. Ingolf, the wanderer, discovers he fathered a child with a woman of the isolated sealand folk during a previous journey.
And the resemblance is unmistakable.
Unmistakable. The toddler looks just like him. It highlights the consequence of wandering, but also the brutal necessities of this new world. The sealand folk are few, they're isolated, and they need fresh blood to survive. And they are, as the source says, refreshingly free of the mainlanders' prejudices. It's just a quiet moment of continuity amidst all this massive change.
So Artos has the sword. He's solidifying his spiritual authority, and he's starting his long journey back west. But back in Montival, the war against the East is already in full brutal swing. The primary antagonists are the forces of Corwin and the regime of the usurper Martin Thurston, who rules from Boise.
The threat is immediate, and it feels overwhelming in the West. Martin Thurston, who's the son of the former president, he allegedly killed his own father to seize power.
So he's ruling this expansionist, disciplined military state, and it's aligned with the Cutter cult, the Church Universal and Triumphant.
Right. So Montival's first priority is defense and containment.
And this defense strategy is laid out vividly at the strategic meeting led by Artos's half-sister, Saint-Novel, in the town of Bend. I want to talk about her appearance, because the sources focus so heavily on the symbolism of her 60 pounds of dented, articulated plate armor.
That armor was pure political theater, and it was designed to convey an immediate, grim message. Plate armor, especially dented plate armor, is a symbol of aristocratic status combined with proven frontline experience.
She's showing them she's been in the fight.
Exactly. She used the physical weight and the battle-scarred appearance of the suit to command respect from the gathered ranchers and delegates. She's showing them that the war was not theoretical, it was bloody, it was expensive, and it was already upon them.
And the message she delivered was brutally practical. Bend could not be held.
She was completely clear-eyed about the superior capabilities of the Boisean enemy. They possess a full siege train.
So, wheel belfries, massive siege towers.
Trebuchets, the heavy stuff. Holding Bend against that kind of heavy artillery would simply mean losing the PPA's most valuable asset, their experienced troops.
So what was the actual strategy for Bend then?
The strategy was a calculated tactical retreat. The goal was, in her words, to bleed them until they're down to a level we can tackle.
So make them pay for every inch.
Make them pay. Hold the position only long enough to force the Boiseans to commit resources and suffer high casualties, while at the same time ensuring all the family's essential equipment and livestock were evacuated through the heavily fortified Cascades mountain passes. It was sacrificing ground to preserve strength.
That tactical decision feeds directly into the conflict we see at the Battle of Waitsburg, which demonstrates this unique combination of medieval and salvage technology that Montival employs.
Waitsburg is a perfect microcosm of the entire war. The Montival forces were led by the PPA. You have heavily armored knights, men-at-arms in full cap-a-pie.
Head-to-toe plate armor.
Right. Alongside the surprisingly effective bicycle-borne infantry, that's a PPA staple, using salvaged bikes for rapid urban mobility.
And then we encounter the Zilla men, who use a weapon that borders on the horrific weaponized oil.
They're specialized troops, and they're operating these large catapults that don't throw rocks, but globes of burning liquid. It's essentially an improvised chemical weapon, maybe some form of Greek fire substitute.
And it clings to the target.
So it clings like glue. The sources paint this terrifying picture of Boisean soldiers just rolling on the ground, shrieking, unable to put out the flames.
Okay, wait a minute. So Montival, led by a king who just issued a mandate for mercy and restraint, is fighting a technologically regressed war, but they're using what amounts to a chemical weapon. Doesn't that suggest Montival is embracing the very brutality they claim to fight against?
And that's the tension right at the heart of this conflict. The PPA leadership, particularly Sandra Arminger, operates on pure pragmatism. The goal isn't moral purity, it's survival. The sources highlight that they face an enemy defined by this chilling, almost inhuman discipline. Despite the burning oil, the Boiseans displayed automatic machine precision. They formed perfect overlapping shield walls and threw synchronized volleys of javelins.
So they're facing a machine.
A human machine. This enemy is so ruthlessly efficient that Montival feels compelled to use shock weapons, even brutal ones, to break that discipline and just survive. It's a necessary brutality that's forced on them by the quality of their enemy.
And that extreme military discipline from Boise, it confirms that Montival can't win on its own. They need a massive strategic realignment, which leads to the crucial negotiations with the Lakota chiefs, Red Leaf and Rick Three Bears.
This is the turning point. And it's held at Castle Todnangst, the Castle of the Anguish of Death. A wonderfully grim name.
It is.
The PPA delegation, Sandra, Juniper Mackenzie, and Tefane, they're forced to be utterly honest. Their superior technology and fighting skill won't matter against the sheer numbers the CUT and Boise can field. They admit it, they say. Corwin and Boise will beat us in the next couple of years unless this alliance works.
The history of the relationship between, the U.S. government and the Lakota is, well, it's terrible.
Right.
So Red Leaf's primary concern isn't the current war. It's historical memory and the fear of repeating past betrayals.
Precisely. His deepest concern is allowing Midwestern allies like Iowa, or the Square Staters as they call them, to bring in railroads and build forts on sacred Lakota land. He fears that this temporary military alliance will turn into permanent annexation and resource stripping.
Just like what happened in the 19th century.
The exact same playbook. He needs an ironclad assurance of Lakota sovereignty.
And this is where Artos' new title and his political model, the High King, or Ard-Ri, becomes the key to the entire alliance.
Juniper Mackenzie explains the concept perfectly. She stresses that Ard-Ri does not translate to emperor or boss man. It's an ancient concept, literally High King in Irish, where the king reigns over the whole of Montival while at the same time respecting the laws, ways, customs, and gods of the many different peoples.
It's a decentralized model.
A very decentralized model where the High King is more of a guarantor of law and a defender of the realm than an absolute ruler. This distinction is the only thing that could possibly appeal to fiercely independent nations like the Lakota.
But verbal assurances aren't enough, are they?
Not at all. The alliance is ultimately sealed by the most powerful spiritual act possible, Artos' solemn oath upon the sword.
This elevates the political agreement to a spiritual covenant.
Completely. Artos swears by the sword of the lady, binding himself and all his future successors to the pledge that the Lakota will hold their lands freely, forever, with their own laws and gods intact.
And the Lakota accept this.
They accept it because, in this new world where modern institutions have failed, a sacred oath taken upon an artifact of proven divine power holds infinitely more weight than any printed treaty or political document could.
That oath sounds incredibly powerful, but isn't that a massive political risk? He's tying the entire future of the Montival monarchy to this promise, effectively limiting his own successor's authority forever. Is that really wise politics for a king trying to consolidate power?
It is brilliant, necessary politics. He sacrifices theoretical future centralized power for immediate, desperately needed military survival. Those 12,000 experienced light cavalry pledged by Red Leaf are essential for mobility against the Cutter armies.
Yeah, without them, they lose.
Without them, Montival loses the war and the monarchy ends anyway. The oath proves that Artos values the long-term survival of the realm over the immediate power of the crown, which is precisely what makes him a trustworthy Ard-Ri.
With the Western Front secured, or at least stabilized, Artos needs to consolidate his other flanks. While he's journeying back from Nantucket, he stops in Norrheim, that isolated Norse realm in Maine. And he arrives just after they've defeated a major enemy force in the Battle of the Six Hills.
This was a really fierce engagement. It was fought by Bjarni Eriksson's Norrheimers against a large, determined force of Bekwa, that's the local term for the disorganized, wild men.
They were being led by a Corwin sorcerer, a Trolljuring.
Right. The sources describe the Bekwa fighting with this desperate, fanatic determination, like men who had burned their boats behind them.
And the spiritual element was clearly present, right?
Yeah.
The Norrheimers were fighting something they couldn't just defeat with steel.
They feared the enemy's spiritual strength, specifically the trollcraft of the sorceress, so Artos' arrival with the Sword of the Lady served a critical morale and spiritual function. It confirmed to the Norrheimers that their resistance was backed by a greater, more benevolent divine power.
Yeah.
It really solidified the resolve after that initial fear.
But Bjarni, who's now the king of Norrheim, he demonstrates that he's not just a devout warrior. He's a brilliant, almost Machiavellian political operator.
His move is masterful. He volunteers Norrheim's best, most capable troops to join Artos' war band heading west.
Ostensibly as a crucial contribution to the Grand Coalition.
Right. But the real strategic maneuver is that this commitment forces his most capable local rival, a powerful man of war and chief named Suffred Jerison, to join the expedition as well.
So, under the guise of strengthening the alliance, Bjarni is strategically exiling his domestic opposition.
Precisely. He consolidates his power base back home in Norrheim by sending his most threatening rival and his followers off to fight a distant war in the west. It is a stunning example of how geopolitical necessity can solve internal political problems at the same time.
So Artos now has this consolidated war band.
Yeah.
About 500 elite fighters, including the Norrheimers and the newly converted Moorish corsairs, who are eager to fight the people who manipulated them.
Yep.
But they need to traverse half the continent quickly, and in a world without gas or planes. That means logistics is the king's greatest challenge.
This is where the true ingenuity of the post-change world really shines through. The innovative use of the pre-change infrastructure, the abandoned rail lines. This entire mission hinges on the hippomotive-drawn trains.
The hippomotive-drawn trains. Tell us about the engineering team behind this. They sound like the unsung heroes of this whole thing.
They absolutely are. Artos's companions, notably Fred Purston, Ingolf, and most critically Father Ignatius, who Artos calls the real engineer, they devised this solution.
And Father Ignatius had experience with this.
Yes, he had worked on rail equipment as a novice before the change, and that seemingly obsolete knowledge is now the foundation of the entire war effort.
So let's get into the design of these pedal carts. What makes them so fast and efficient?
They are a high-low-tech marvel. They use salvaged materials. 4 bicycles locked into an ashwood frame at the front, 4 at the back, with this resilient wicker load bed in the middle for personnel.
And they even attached a saw blade V out front to cut through the overgrown brush on the tracks?
Right. These scout carts are fast. They're capable of reaching 30 miles per hour for rapid transit and for scouting ahead.
But the real logistical miracle is how they move the tonnage required to feed and equip 500 men and their horses across that distance. That requires more than just human muscle.
And this is where they leverage the forgotten law of physics that rules this new world. Low friction on a steel rail. The heavy loads, tons of food, fodder, and tools, are moved by heavy rail wagons. And these wagons are pulled by teams of 3 horses hitched in a line ahead of the wagon.
What's the efficiency gain compared to road travel?
Oh, it's exponentially better. A horse pulling on steel rails can haul 15 tons or better. That far exceeds the weight they could pull on muddy, broken roads. The entire logistics challenge pivots on this one fact.
So this hyper-efficient rail system allows the warband to maintain an impressive average speed of 20 miles per day.
Yes, even with necessary portages around washouts and broken bridges. It means the warband can complete this massive journey, a 2-week trek just to reach the Mississippi in time for the coalition meetings in the Midwest.
So the core challenge is solved by Artos's dependence on specialized, non-military technical expertise.
The king's victory hinges not on the strength of his arm, but on Father Ignatius's ability to calculate rail resistance and plan portage routes. This system underscores the new reality. Building a post-apocalyptic kingdom requires engineers and farmers, not just knights and bards.
The ultimate political and military convergence takes place at the Des Moines Summit. Artos's campaign success depends entirely on bringing the Midwestern giant into the alliance.
It all comes down to this.
And the sources are clear. Iowa is the richest, most populous, and most powerful nation in the new North America.
That statement is critical, and it really requires context. Iowa is powerful because they were geographically sheltered and agriculturally robust.
Yeah.
The instant collapse of technology, it disproportionately devastated the densely populated coasts and cities. Iowa, with its strong agricultural base and relatively low population density, survived the Great Dying far better. They were the one part of the Old World that was truly insulated.
Which makes them the sleeping giant.
The sleeping giant that Corwin's recklessness has now awakened.
So the meeting formalizes the Anti-Cutter Alliance, the League of Des Moines, and Iowa's leadership, Regent Kate Heaselrode and Chancellor Abel Husink, they are clearly running the show. What is Iowa's calculated motive for supporting Artos's distant High Kingdom?
Their motive is stability and long-term regional control. It's not allegiance to a king based in Oregon. They favor Artos's High King model because it establishes Iowa as primus inter pares first among equals within the league.
First among equals.
Right. They don't want to annex everyone. They want to be the recognized neutral power broker, the economic and military anchor that keeps the region peaceful and prosperous.
So they're using Artos's spiritual authority to legitimize their own practical economic dominance. They want the power to mediate, not the burden of occupation.
Exactly. They view the war as a necessary cleanup operation. They want to defeat Corwin, eliminate the threat to the stability of the Midwest, and then return home, securing their position as the undisputed neutral heavyweight without having to fight a costly war of occupation against all these newly allied nations.
And when you tally the combined forces of this coalition, the numbers are just staggering for this new age.
It is a formidable force. The coalition, that's Montival, Norrheim, Iowa, Illinois, the Lakota, and others, it totals well over 60,000 men assembled for the field campaign.
Plus the Lakota.
Plus the 12,000 experienced Lakota light cavalry. You have a massive military machine. And crucially, Iowa alone can field over 100,000 total militia if required.
And they have specialized assets, field artillery, engineers.
And massive supply chains. This sounds less like a medieval army and more like a regressed industrial mobilization. It must be a terrifying sight for the Corwinites. It represents the largest organized army seen since the change.
And it includes engineers dedicated to maintaining those rail lines.
And support services, logistics that modern generals would envy. The sheer scale is what breaks the power balance. Corwin can field numbers, but not with this level of sustained organization and logistical backing.
Artos uses this critical summit not just to secure numbers, but to reaffirm the moral standard of the conflict. This ties back to the mercy he showed at Nantucket.
He issues a clear war mandate. He demands solemn pledges from all the Allied leadership that this war is specifically against the Cutter cult and the regime of Martin Thurston, not the civilian populace.
So no war crimes.
He dictates that there will be no unpunished killings of civilians or arson or rape.
He's treating the population they're about to conquer as his future subjects.
That's the long-term political play. If they treat the occupied populations with respect, he avoids the crippling cost of a prolonged insurgency, and he ensures he doesn't start his reign with half the continent cursing the name of Montival. It's strategic morality.
One of the most powerful reflective moments in the sources is the scouting trip Artos takes with Father Ignatius and others to the Tower of the Ancients in what must be the ruins of Chicago.
This is a moment of profound philosophical reckoning for him. The relic is a pre-change skyscraper, nearly 2,000 feet high. It's unquestionably the Willis Tower. It stands near Lake Michigan in the treacherous lands of Illinois, a monument to a power they can no longer even conceive of.
And Artos' reaction is described as sheer awe at the powers and the magnificence of the lost world. It's a very emotional response to what civilization once achieved.
He's overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the engineering and the lost knowledge. Even Fred Thurston, who carries the genetic memory of his father's desire to reclaim the old technology, he admits he finally understands that desperate yearning now.
But Artos offers a vital truth about their current situation.
He does. He says, they left us. We're not the ancients, but we're their children.
That distinction is so crucial. They're not trying to resurrect the past, but build a viable future from its wreckage. But the trip raises a difficult question about the ultimate limits of their post-change civilization.
Artos questions whether they can ever achieve anything so magnificent again. Are they doomed to, in his words, living in their shadows, tearing down their wonders and using them to build sheep pens or hammer into spearheads? The skyscraper forces them to confront the psychological weight of their collapse.
They're building a feudal society inside the bones of a hyper-advanced one.
And it's both inspiring, they survived, and deeply humbling. They can't replicate what they see. This trip, it cements Artos' understanding that his task is not merely fighting a war, but proving that this new, humbler civilization is worthy of survival.
Following the Des Moines summit, the unified forces move out, and the sources shift to immediate, fierce action, specifically the Battle of Anchor Bar 7. This is fought in Dominion Territory Canadian lands, now contested.
And this action showcases the realities of the new rail-based warfare. Artos' sister, Ritva, who is a Dundane Ranger,
which is a term implying a highly skilled, mobile scout/tracker drawn from the Mackenzie tradition.
Exactly. She's on a scouting mission using a pedal rail car when she's ambushed by a large force of Cutter horse archers.
They can't rely on speed to escape. They have to rely on brute, coordinated strength.
Absolutely. The rail car is too slow against mounted archers, so Ritva and her redcoat escort are forced into this desperate, physically exhausting maneuver. They have to use sheer muscle to reverse the rail car and push it backwards, fighting desperately while retreating until they can reach the Anchor Bar 7 ranch headquarters.
And the ranch itself is an interesting example of hybrid defense. It connects these ancient fortification techniques with salvaged modern materials.
It's a powerful fortress. It's built with thick, rammed earth walls, which is a very ancient and effective form of defense. But the engineering inside is clever. It uses a methane digester system.
Likely powered by livestock waste, salvaged from farm equipment.
Probably. And it uses this to power jets that heat vats of boiling water and oil ready to be poured over the battlements. It's medieval defense, but using a pre-changed scientific principle adapted for low-tech energy generation.
The ultimate clash, however, involves Artos leading his heavy cavalry against a large cutter force. And this is where we see the legendary power of the sword manifested in its most terrifying form.
Artos enters the Riestrad,
A term rooted in Gaelic mythology, referring to a divinely induced battle frenzy, almost like the Norse berserker gang.
very similar. Or the frenzy of Cuchulainn. He doesn't just fight well, he loses himself, becoming wholly of the moment. He is described as the still heart of the action, striking and killing with impossible lightning speed and power.
How does the Riestrad serve as a weapon beyond just pure combat strength?
It is a profound psychological weapon. The sources make it very clear that the frenzy makes Artos terrifying to witness. Men flee in sheer panic or, and this is perhaps more telling, some of the enemy soldiers simply stab themselves rather than face him directly.
Wow.
This psychological impact, it confirms his status not just as a skilled warrior, but as a divinely aided king. It legitimizes his claim through sheer, unholy power on the battlefield.
But this intense fighting, it comes with a significant personal cost, which grounds the narrative in the human element.
It does.
The sources detail the difficult bonds and sacrifices made by Artos's inner circle.
You see Ingolf, the Wisconsin man, reluctantly taking his inexperienced, military-eager nephew, Ensign Mark Vogler, into his command.
And Ingolf understands the grim probability that Mark won't survive.
He knows. He knows he won't survive, even in a camp, let alone in combat. But Mark's father pleads with Ingolf, knowing the boy will be marginally safer under his uncle's disciplined watch than if he just ran off alone. It's a heartbreaking necessity. You pay for experience with potential death.
And Artos, the king who wields the lightning, he suffers this piercing human grief over the death of a trusted comrade, Jake.
That grief is described as the bitter cost of the war. Despite his divine power, Artos is still deeply human. He acknowledges that the pain he feels for Jake is the same pain his wife, Matilda, will feel for him if he falls.
He wishes he didn't know that feeling.
He does. And it serves to humanize the king, reinforcing his reluctant nature. He understands the stakes better than anyone.
And what of his former enemy, Major Graber, the captured Corrigan officer who finds a path to redemption?
This is a really important detail about the spiritual function of the sword. Graber, who was mentally manipulated by the prophet Sathaz's masters, is cleansed by the sword.
So the sword freed him.
Artos intentionally waited until Graber had wrestled with his own conscience before using the sword to free him from that mental bondage. Graber is then dedicated to fighting the COT, becoming an internal spy and an asset sent back toward Corwin territory. It shows that the sword's power can redeem as well as destroy.
The culmination of all this political maneuvering, military consolidation, and personal sacrifice is the ultimate symbol of the new kingdom, the hand-fasting, the wedding of Artos and Matilda at Castle Corbeck.
It is the moment Montival, as a unified political entity, is truly born. The ceremony is deeply traditional Mackenzie. It's filled with MacLean pipers, ritual dancing, and the symbolic tossing of the couple and stepping over the broom.
So this ritual grounds the new kingdom in continuity and shared custom.
It does. And Matilda is clearly more than just a consort. She's an integral part of the political structure. She is the queen and Artos's essential political counsel.
She shares the burden of the throne.
She advises him. She reads the true intentions of their new, powerful allies. She's the one who explains Iowa's calculated motivations to Artos, ensuring he doesn't mistake their cooperation for altruism.
And she delivers the final, sobering warning about the price of their shared power.
Yes. She tells him that power will be a cold and thankless third head on your pillow. It is a heavy crown, shared with the necessity of constant political vigilance and the awareness of constant threat.
And the final image of the sources is the newly raised green-silver-blue flag of Montival.
Displaying the crown, mountain, and the sword, it's flying over the fortress, signifying that a powerful new kingdom has been forged, ready to face the long, difficult war ahead.
What an incredible journey through the formation of a new civilization. In a staggeringly short amount of time, just 25 years after the change Artos, Mikeson has accomplished the near impossible.
He really has. He has successfully united the fiercely independent Lakota, the distant and organized Norrheim, his own powerful PPS/Mackenzie Montival, and the logistical and numerical might of the Midwestern economic giant Iowa, and the League of Des Moines.
His success hinged on recognizing that the future must be built using the best of the past.
Right. He leveraged the forgotten physics of the old world, the rail lines and those hippomotive trains for logistics, while confirming his ultimate authority through the ancient mystical power of the sword, securing his position as a divinely aided Ard-Ri.
He took a fragmented map of warlords and turned it into a grand coalition capable of fighting the massive, malignant Cutter Empire.
He did. So what does this all mean for the future of this world? Artos is not just fighting to survive. He is deliberately shaping a new civilization based on decentralized power, that Ard-Ri model, which is a conscious rejection of the destructive, hyper-centralized systems that preceded the change.
Which raises the ultimate provocative question for you, the listener. Artos successfully convinced powerful, often rival nations to join his cause to win the war. But the real power now resides in the Midwest.
Specifically in Iowa, which is economically and numerically dominant. Given that Artos has sacrificed central power for immediate survival, what does success look like for him in the long term? Is merely winning the war against Corwin enough, or is Artos now boomed to spend his reign navigating and ultimately surviving the complex, politically calculated demands of his overwhelmingly powerful new allies?
The war may end, but the politics of the Grand Coalition are just beginning. A fascinating problem to be left with. Thank you for taking the deep dive with us.
Until next time, keep exploring the history that is yet to be written.